All right, Rio here, and this is your week 2 Learn Together. So I have the benefit of having just finished client JOS, JavaScript, and I watched the students work through that course. And one of the things we did that I thought was helpful, but I'm going to try something different this time, is during their Learn Togethers, they were working towards their actual first develop project. And so what I'm going to do this time, and I want you to contextually understand why I'm doing it this way, is I'm going to have us build something together that's not what Andrew built, right? It's not the Node app. And as you're doing this, what I want you to do is actually, and this week I'm going to have you make a decision about what you're going to build. What's going to be the target, the concept that you're going to do. I'm going to have you do that. And what I recommend doing to really assist you in doing the best on the develop it, which I will look at before we end today, just the schedule, so you understand where we're heading. And so that's what we're going to do. So what we're going to do together is we're going to take what we've learned with this section code up that we just finished, and we're going to build out the beginnings of an email, an email application, okay? And I want you to work on the compose, right? And I've said this, and I'm looking at the write-up here, right? So, and the thing is, it's not that you have to have this perfect. It's that you attempt something. And before you, and I'll go through the requirements, but I just want to say this, is that I'm actually not going to show you the code I wrote until you hit reply. And the idea is that you write your code, okay, in that reply. Not, not in the reply, but you write your code, push it to your public repo. And so here's the idea: is I want you to see how well you can translate what we've learned in this section into actually something new that you haven't seen done before. Because in that, you will start the process of doing your own develop it. And again, I recommend after each Learn Together that we do, actually go do that thing for your chosen topic. Okay. So now coming back to the instruction, right? So I want you to implement an email app concept. I want you to set up the command for, I should put command here, no, compose command I did, and include describe, the builder, and the handler. Okay, now if you've never done anything with yargs, which I'm guessing most everyone has not, we're not actually coding up what these commands are going to do yet. We're basically in setting up some objects that will help when the user goes to run this command to know what's required to handle it when they do successfully run. So it's really looking more at a command line user, that when that user sends a command, we capture those arguments, and in this case, yargs, joke on pirates here. And so we're not actually, again, I want you to understand this, we're not actually coding this up. We're just setting up what the command, what it needs, a response when you get it. So anyway, I'm going to go over what he did just in a little bit just to help you a little more understand what we're doing. But in your case, right, I want you to do the compose, which for an email system kind of makes sense, right? It's like the main thing you're doing with an email. So do that, and then include at least 4 pieces. Like on his, he did the title and the body, right? So I want you, for our email app, to have at least 4, okay? And I suspect our 4 are going to be similar, but maybe different, and that's okay, because everyone will approach this with a different way of thinking about the problem, okay? So, and then I want you to determine one other command And boy, you can really think about your own experience with email, what that might be. Okay. So, and then do the same thing where you're doing a describe, builder, and handler for that. Okay, so test your work, make sure it works the way you want. Rewatch, and this is what I was saying earlier, rewatch any of the code up we had this week for your review, but don't look at other folks' code yet, okay? Because the idea is not that you have it perfect or that you're exactly right. It's that part of this is also getting used to sharing your own output, because it is definitely, in my opinion, an emotional thing to share the code you wrote. It's like your baby, or you're going to feel judged or whatever. There's all those things that happen, but getting over that is a really important part of coding. And I say this because I had to get over it. So anyway, and if you do, okay, so here's the other part of my thing is, if you do look at other people's code, just be honest about it, right? It's just like, I didn't know where to start, so I looked, right? And so, and that's the important part too, is just be honest. So in order to get full points for this work, right, and there's going to be 2 parts, but I want you to write 150 just about doing this part of it, right? And then I say 2 substantive replies. You can actually reply to the second part if you want as well. And the idea is that after you post your code, and if somebody else has posted theirs, go look at theirs and compare it to yours. Because the other part of this class that I find really helpful to students is if you can read or attempt to read other folks' code. Now, one of the things I noticed, and I need to do this, is I didn't actually put any comments, and I needed to, but I didn't yet. So the more comments you put, the more helpful to other students, but also when you do what we call, there's oftentimes the way you write code, it is self-descriptive, because you're using terms that, and key and variable names and function names that make sense, right? So anyway, so by the way, I want you to do this in a new directory called email app and public. I'll show you where mine's setting, just for FYI. So, but on part 2, I want you to write a good paragraph on what you're going to create, right? So now that you've walked through the beginning of the Node app, you've now done on your own an email app concept. What's your app concept that you're going to create for this class? And the thing, and I understand you don't know where we're going. That's okay, because your app concept could flex and kind of grow into other things. But I want you to have an idea, because the thing is, this class goes so quick, you need to have that in place. So write a good paragraph as a reply here. I almost wanted you to do it in a markdown file, but we'll talk about that later. So write at least a good paragraph on what you will build. Okay, so I'm going to move to my, this is the one we built with Andrew, right? So the yargs commands. So remember, again, as I said before, these are not actually doing remove note. These are just setting up how we're going to, when we send command line arguments, how we're going to evaluate those arguments. Okay, so he has set up, right, add, remove, list, and read. So I'm only going to make you right now do compose, and then I want you to come up with one on your own. I use Chalk too, because I thought that was great. I think Chalk is fun. That's something new he's added this time. But here's what I want you to know too. So what we have is yargs, right, which we know we're getting from doing this. Oh, before I say that, do not forget that you actually have to go to the NPM, do npm init to set up your project so that you get your package.json. Think about what modules we are going to need for you to install for this work. So you need to do that, right? And so there's I would think at minimum there's one, but you could do others as well. Okay. But coming back to this, so what you're doing here is yargs, right? So you're calling because you installed, and now you've brought in all the yargs code that you can reference on yargs by requiring it. Right now we're not using FS, so I could get rid of that. I am using Chalk. Again, this is the Notes app, and I just left some of the stuff he did in there. I ended up setting up a thing called Go Text. So it's kind of like, in the green, chalk green inverse. And that way, when I wanted my output to be chalk green inversed, I could just say Go Text. It just was something I was playing with to kind of make my code a little more readable. But let me just walk through this for those of you that are new to JavaScript. So we're calling yards.command. So we're calling a method on yards, and we're passing that method, and in this case, an object. Okay, so in this object, then we have key value pairs. So the key is command, the value is add. The key is describe, the value is add a new note. These are just string inputs. And then we do this thing called builder, right? So the idea of builder, these are the things that we're going to want our command to include, right? And the nice thing here is that's why we not only do like what it is, the title and the body, but what is it, right? And then a demand, which is awesome. It's required. So if the user doesn't give it to us, we show them an error. We saw that in running it. And that's why you need to make sure when you're doing yours, you make sure that it runs the way you anticipate it should run. So then we have a handler for this add that actually outputs, so that when it is called, when the add command is put on the command line and we give it the required information, then we output some content back to the user through argv, which we talked about being on the process. But in this case, we're just putting in the title and the body. Okay, we're going to actually change the way we look at these later, but that's okay. It's coming later. And then, of course, this important part of yards parse, just to where it actually goes and parses those things so we see that output. Okay, so that's, and there's and here we have our first, function that we see running here as a handler, right, off of again, calling this method. So if these terms are new for you, that you have Node.js, right? I gave at the very beginning of the semester what we use for 93, but there are other websites I could tell you, like Code Academy, if you just want to go and study some of the basic language structures of JavaScript. Okay, so looking down here, what you can see is so this was up in our private directory, right? So now this is going to go in our public, and you want to call it email app, right? You're going to install at least one, hopefully others, modules. You're going to set up your app.js. We're not doing any other external of our own code. We'll do that in the next section. But in a completed setup, this is the minimum of what you will have for this week. Okay? So then in your reply, let me just bring back this real quick. So in your reply, what you will do, again, you won't be able to see other people's reply until you do this. I want you to give us a link to your code, right? And then talk about the experience of doing this, right? And then write up what you're going to do for your first development project. This is just from a concept standpoint, right? So that's what you need to do this week. I hope, let me come back here, and I'll come back here. It's always fun. For those of you that don't know, there we go. I work on a Pixelbook, and I'm running a Linux subsystem, but I've worked on Windows, I've worked on Mac, I still have a Mac in my house. I just find this environment and this system to be what works well for me. Just FYI. So I think there was one other person trying to set up a Chromebook to do the environment, and it can, but I'm not going to get into that now. So here's the other thing, right? So this is our second week together. That's what I said I would end with. So let me actually look. So you have a context of where we're going to go as far as our first development project. Okay. So in this case, we're setting here, of course, in, this is the right class, right? So let me actually maximize this. So for 94, right? Your first develop it is going to be on the 6th of November, right? And so what we end up doing is we finish the code up for what skills you're going to need. And we're actually going to build out this note app from Andrew. And through the weeks, we'll be building out the email app. But I would recommend as we build each week that you work on your Dev Zero and don't wait until we get here. Now, you will need to do a code review. I talked about that in the attendance video, so just keep that in mind. I will have a schedule for the days that you can come see me, either virtually or in person. And so I'll have that schedule set up in the next week or so that you have an idea. And students often get on that schedule as soon as they can because they do know it fills up. But you can start seeing me really as soon as you're ready for me to review your code, but there'll be some requirements. So I also need to draft the requirements for this so you have a good idea. Okay? All right. So that's it. I hope you find this fun. Remember, it's that you made the attempt. It's that you follow my requirements. But more than anything, it's that you're starting to think about how you might approach the first develop it project for this class. And what I find to be one of the most beneficial skills, which is actually being able to take a concept and create a code base that implements that concept. Okay, thanks a lot. Talk to you later.